Happy September 12th, or whatever day it is that you're listening to this. Welcome to the Don't Stifle Me podcast. My name is Jacob Stiefel. If you're new, then welcome. If not, thank you so much for coming back. Either way, if you haven't yet, make sure you click subscribe on whatever you're listening to, whether it's iTunes app or Stitcher or YouTube. And the goal of this podcast is to help inspire people to chase whatever it is you're passionate about through open talks with guests, mainly in the music and performing arts, and discussing how they've done it, what they've learned, stories from along the way, and whatever else comes up in conversation. As of right now, friends, this podcast is solely listener funded, so we have no advertisements or commercials here. So in saying that, I invite you over to patreon.com/DSM podcast. There, by helping fund the production process of these episodes, you'll get access to behind the scenes stuff like pictures and video from the days we record and the conversations that I have, to MP3 downloads of some of the songs that I jam with the guests, and to even coming in, for a certain level, you could come in and sit through a recording or have your name read aloud on a podcast or put on the website. There's all kinds of things, all different levels that you can go check out. And it all starts at as little as $1 per month donation. So go check that out. www.patreon.com/DSM podcast. But for now, let's move onward and get to today's episode number 28.
Pick it up again.
Today's guest is BJ Golden. BJ, well, he's a musical wizard for one thing, but he is a guitarist and utility player for country artist Brantley Gilbert. Now, for those of you who don't know, utility player means he plays multiple instruments throughout the show. So he'll play guitar, dobro, mandolin, whatever the song calls for. I met BJ a few weeks ago. He and I and some mutual friends of ours all went kayaking over in East Tennessee the week of the solar eclipse back in August. And we all sat around talking about music and passing around instruments each night that we were there. And I pretty quickly knew that I really had to get him in here to talk for the podcast. So here we are talking music theory and dream chasing and growing beards and playing guitar and all kinds of good stuff. My talk with BJ Golden. Joe, were y'all on the road this past weekend?
We were in we did two shows, the first of which was in Bangor, Maine, and the second was in Hartford, Connecticut.
Okay.
And then we got 4 more shows where I think this run we're pretty close, like Cincinnati and somewhere else in Missouri, and then Virginia Beach and Raleigh-Durham, and that's it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Are you going to go on vacation, go on a cruise or something when you're going to the mountains and forget about
the mountains? Maybe cruises. Yeah. I don't do.
Yeah.
No, I'm not a big person on ships. I get motion sick and all that, so I try and stay away from those things. But I am going to stay in Durham for one day. There's one of the best flamenco guitarists in the world, a guy named Vicente Amigo, is playing. He's only in the States for about a week, and he's got a show at Duke University in Durham.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to stay there.
Where's he from?
Spain.
Okay.
Not sure what part, but I mean, he was kind of mentored and worked with Paco de Lucia, who was the most prominent flamenco guitarist for 3 or 4 generations. He recently passed away 2 or 3 years ago. And so Vicente is kind of like the new hot shot. Not new. I mean, he's been around for 3 decades or so, but he's absolutely incredible. And
is that what you studied? Flamenco?
I studied classical, but I actually flamenco music is what got me into classical music. At that time, I was 17 or 18 years old. Did a guitar competition, and the guy that won was this flamenco guitarist, and I'd never heard that style of music before. I was everything was foreign to me about that, and so I kind of met him and started taking lessons from him, and that kind of established my interest in nylon string guitar, classical guitar, and then slowly kind of started listening to more of that repertoire where I'd grown up listening to blues and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Muddy Waters and B.B. King and those guys, and then Yeah, it was kind of this shift that happened over a few years, and then when I decided to study music, I figured the classical approach would lend itself to that, and then I got in a flamenco band and still really enjoy that music.
Yeah.
So that's
so where are you from? We'll go back before all that.
Houston, Texas, or Baytown, Texas.
Oh, okay.
Just to the east side of Houston.
That. So how are you still have family there?
Yep.
Everybody okay?
Everybody, they were very fortunate, and they're doing just fine. But yeah, my parents, brother and sister, and their families are all in the Houston, Baytown area. I
got you. Yeah, I've got a lot of cousins around in like West Houston, downtown, north of Houston, and over close to Beaumont.
Were they all right?
Yeah. Okay. Some power outages, and they had to evacuate. A few of them had to leave, but other than that, it was pretty lucky. Like I was on the phone all that week, like checking on everybody, texting everybody. Everybody all right?
Sure.
So
yeah, my cousin got 3 or 4 feet of water in her house, and another close friend of mine, his sister, last I checked on Thursday or Friday, still had 3 feet of water in her house. So it's a pretty nasty situation still.
Man, so did you grow up there in Houston?
I did. I grew up in Baytown and stayed there till I guess just before I turned 19. I moved to Tennessee and moved to Murfreesboro and started attending MTSU with the goal of becoming a audio engineer and working in recording studios, and that was kind of the direction I saw myself taking because I had no formal education or training in music. And I
was going to ask, when did you start playing music? How old were you?
I started playing piano at 7, and then the teacher that I was studying with as a young kid just wasn't right for me. Yeah. And then so I got a guitar around 9 and just kind of took to it. I was learning a lot on my own, had a couple teachers that helped me for a year or two, but then I spent the majority of my teenage years just kind of with a guitar and listening to music and figuring stuff out. You know? Cool.
So what kind of stuff? Like, so you said you listened to like Stevie Ray Vaughan. And
that was a big one. I mean, whenever I was about 13 years old, a buddy of mine, somebody had mentioned Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I didn't know who he was. And so this was back in the day when you could go to the mall and into a music store and buy a CD. And so I bought
music store, like a physical place that you
this
go?
Person named Sam Goody, if you remember him.
Yeah.
So I went into Sam Goody and bought Texas Flood, and man, that record kind of changed my perspective of the guitar and how it could be played. And so I used to just kind of sit up in my room and I had a Stratocaster, and I just kind of work on a bunch of Stevie stuff, and then that kind of, I don't know, then my uncle and brother and parents, they listened to music, but my uncle and brother played a little bit, but nobody was a musician per se. So they were helpful in guiding me in just like, you should listen to and play this. Yeah. So I remember for an 8th grade talent show, I got together and we did Hotel California, the acoustic version of the Eagles. And at that point, at 14, I was able to kind of play all of Joe Walsh's acoustic parts and all that, and so
I was happy to get through a song at 14.
Yeah, I was doing okay, but then I got into I've always been all over the place into various sports and music, and so I never really took music seriously until I was probably 20 years old.
Yeah. Okay, so that's up until then. It was just like, I'm really good at this and it's fun. But
I wouldn't say really good. I was decent for that age.
Yeah,
and but I had a rock band in high school, and we did pretty well. We won a couple Battle of the Bands contests, and we had it was really cool because all of our friends in high school, and we went to a large high school. I think my graduating class had about 600 people in it.
Yeah. Oh wow!
And that was down from about 1,000 that started as freshmen. So, but
is Baytown, is that like in between Houston and Galveston?
No, Baytown's on the east side of Houston, so it's probably 30 minutes east of Houston on the way to Beaumont.
Okay, I got you.
Just down I-10, but it's still I mean, growing up, I think it was about 80,000 people, 70, 80,000. So it was a large town, and now it's even larger.
What was the name of your rock band?
Walking 49.
Walking 49.
Yeah, me and my still good friend Daniel Newman, he lives here in Nashville. He's a prominent chef around the area. We were on just kind of this trip out floating rivers in West Texas, and we were walking around, and we found this old dirty sign that just said 49. I think it was like a camping number sign, and walking around, found a 49. Why not, man? It's a band name. Man. Yeah. So I don't know, probably not the most clever of names, but it stuck for a while.
It's a unique one though.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really make sense.
No, it doesn't.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you hear the story, maybe I've still got the sign somewhere.
Oh yeah.
So, and I don't know.
Song, did y'all play one song, or did you play? Like
no, we had. I mean, we recorded a record.
I mean, for the Battle of the Bands.
Oh, right? Battle of the Bands. That was. It wasn't a true battle of the bands, I wouldn't say. It was more battle of how many friends can you bring to our venue.
Right, yeah. I played a couple of those too.
Yeah, and the winner wins. And we, in high school, everybody was real thrilled about going to this all-age venue where people could actually go at anywhere from 14 years old and up or whatever and listen to us play. So we had a lot of friends that were eager and willing to come out and support, where I think as you get older, it's just much harder. People have lives and jobs and commitments, and at that age, that was something that we could do. And we brought a lot of people to the venue and ended up winning. And then we got to go cut like another 3-song demo in a much better studio than we originally recorded in. And it kind of ran its course after high school. Everybody kind of started doing their own thing, and I wanted to pursue music, and so I ended up moving to Nashville. And
so when you moved out here, it wasn't quite. You wanted to do music full time. You started.
I didn't think I had the chops to be a musician out here.
Wow.
So I didn't think I had the skill, or I certainly didn't have the knowledge. So that's kind of why I started taking audio engineering classes, and I started that in Texas.
Yeah.
And so,
but you knew you wanted to be involved.
Exactly.
In music. Okay.
Yeah. And so, and I had even I think from the time I was 15 or 16, I was investing in. At that time, Pro Tools had just come out. So I was getting into that and learning the software. And then right after I graduated high school, I took a year's worth of courses just kind of learning Pro Tools and what MIDI was and how to actually run a patch bay on an SSL console and all that.
What do you think it is about like that whole side of things that bit you from like that early of an age that you wanted to start figuring out like how all that...
It was
audio stuff.
It was, I started getting into
I still don't know what half of it means.
Oh, I know it, right? Yeah, me too. I've gone kind of downhill or regressed since then. But it was one of those things that I think a lot of people get into it for the same reason. You don't have the money to go out and pay a recording studio, and it seems more feasible to just buy the equipment and learn it and do it yourself.
Right.
And so I think you interviewed Eric Bryce not long ago. He and I worked together for quite a while in Texas, and at that time he had gone to Full Sail and he had a lot more knowledge, so I was kind of getting together with him and trying to pick his brain on music stuff, and we did some projects together, and I was actually for a while getting quite a bit of work just cutting EPs for people. And so I was actually doing the recording thing. I was like, this isn't so bad, and enjoyed it. And
it's almost like a puzzle. Yeah. When you get to a certain point, like you hear in your head how you want it to sound or how it needs to sound, and then you hear what it sounds like. You're like, all right, what switches and knobs and shit can I turn to
turn this to 11 and see what happens?
Yeah, right.
And usually it's not good, and it takes you a while to, I don't know, you have to step away and then come back to it, I think, to really hear those things. Yeah. And it's just lessons that I didn't learn as a early teenager.
How long were you? So you went to MTSU. How long did you do audio engineering in there?
I transferred, and the way that it works, coming from out of state to in state, dealing with out of state tuition. Mm-hmm. Long story short, I basically had to go to school part-time and work full-time for 2 semesters to gain residency of the state. So I wasn't paying astronomical rates to go to school.
What was your first job you had over here?
Working as a stagehand. Okay. Through Crew One Productions in Nashville. And
you just go apply?
No, I actually had a friend, Kyle Jones, who still works for Stage Call here in Nashville, organizing 18-wheelers to go out with major organizations. And, right. And Kyle's son, Jordan, and I actually played in a band together in high school. And he was a drummer, and they lived, 30 minutes away. And then they moved to Nashville. And whenever I moved here, I told him I needed a job. And you can always get a job pushing cases and doing labor work. So that's what I did for 6 or 8 years. Just kind of was a grunt pushing things, and fortunately, I didn't have any injuries to my hands.
When did you change over from audio engineering to music?
That I got a.
Was your degree in your undergrad? Or
no, eventually it was. So I moved to MTSU and declared a major in the recording industry. Took classes for a year, but during that time, I met I mean, the pieces just kind of started falling into place. I was working at Soundcheck and working through Crew 1, where I met a guy named Ed Beaver, who was a great luthier and repairman in Nashville for a long time, recently moved to Albuquerque, but he kind of took me under his wing and was a mentor of mine, introduced me to another guy named Ashley Swan, who is currently the production manager for Toby Keith, and at that time was with Winona and several other artists, but he was managing a group called Low Cash Cowboys.
Okay.
And they needed a guitar player, and so I somehow got hooked up with that gig, went on like a 3 or 4 day run with them, doing shows, and it worked out well. So I just decided to kind of quit school at that moment and just travel with them. And I just turned 21 the first weekend out on the road with them.
Man,
so it was,
that was awesome.
Yeah, it was a good time. I was
on the road playing guitar. I'm 21.
Yeah, traveling, playing music. I wasn't making enough money to pay my rent, but that didn't really matter at that time.
Yeah.
Sleeping on the floor of a van.
I mean, really?
Yeah, nobody.
How long did you do that with them?
I did that for a year. That was the agreement I came to with my dad, was that, I could quit school for a year because there was all these aspirations of that gig taking off and doing big things. So I stuck around to see what I thought. And after a year's time, it wasn't progressing like I wanted it to. Yeah. And I also kind of, I got the first day I got on the gig, the bass player and I still keep in contact with all these guys, and it was a great networking experience, but the bass player and drummer, they had so much more experience than me. The bass player went to Berkeley and the drummer had been around for a long time, and I remember like playing through some songs that I didn't know, and the bass player was over there flashing, number signs, and I'm like, what does that mean? I have no idea.
Yeah.
And so
I had to learn all that.
Yeah, well, I couldn't really learn it on the road, it didn't seem like. So, or at that time, it was just very overwhelming. So I think that was a big decision for me to get off the road and actually go back and learn all of the things I didn't know about being a musician, how to be professional, how to understand music theory and to read music and all those things. So that kind of...
I would personally like to give all of BJ's professors and teachers an A+ on your job, teaching him his wizardry skills.
Yes, lots of people along the way have contributed, so
we all,
thanks to them.
BJ and I and our buddy Eric and several other guys went kayaking a few weeks ago for the what do we call it? With
the solar eclipse.
Eclipse, that's it. That's the word I was looking for. And one of the nights we were there, we all sat around out back around a fire, and I was excited to play some music until they all got their instruments out and started playing. And I was like, oh shit, maybe I'll just sit back over here and maybe sing a Merle Haggard song or two. And that's all I'll do.
Yeah, but nobody else sang. So that was nice. Yeah. Everybody had their little bag of tricks, and nobody's was the same. So it was a great mix.
Yeah, it was great. BJ and Steven that plays bass, right?
Stephen Lewis. Yeah.
They were both swapping the guitars back and forth, and then Steven just decides to go sit behind the keyboard and just
he's a monster musician.
He just looked like a wizard back there, just like hunched over that thing, just like Beethoven or something. Yeah, that was fun stuff. But yes, you've done a fantastic job learning the things that you before didn't know.
Thank you. It was a long road, and I still have a long ways to go.
Well, we all do. We're all. If you're not growing and learning, you're not doing anything.
Exactly.
So. Well, so you came back after the low cash thing. Yeah, sorry, I got to turn the fan off in here. It gets a little toasty.
Drinking coffee is making me sweat.
Right? Yeah. Maybe that big beard you got over there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Does your neck get especially warmer than the rest of your?
Yeah, you can't see it on a podcast, but I'm kind of rivaling ZZ Top over here.
I did see a picture of you. I was looking around this morning. I saw a picture of you with playing a Les Paul with like sunglasses on stage with Brantley. I was like, damn, I bet he gets the Billy Gibbons ZZ Top thing all the time.
There was a review from a show we just did in Syracuse, New York, and the whoever wrote the article was very kind, said some nice things about my playing and everything, but the first thing that she mentioned was, or he or she, I don't know, was that, it looks like he could be filling in for ZZ Top.
Yeah.
And then a few years ago, we were in Germany, and I just heard some people speaking German, and then, a ZZ Top, It's like, okay, all over the world.
Follows you.
Yeah.
When you got back from the low cash thing, so you were with him a year, and then you got back, and then you'd kind of been spurred to, okay, I need to go back and learn some things first. So but you were still at So I guess you had to re-enroll back at MTSU.
I did, and it was kind of a painful process. You know, you're always taking a step back to kind of move forward, and so it was learning all the things that I had really neglected for a long time because it wasn't quote quote music to me. It's all the, you know, the fundamental stuff that was written on paper. It wasn't feeling the music, and it was I don't know, it took me a second to kind of get into that mindset. But then when you study music at the academic level, one of the things they do so well is they just bombard you with the information, and it's every day. It's hours and hours and hours a day. You're forced to take piano lessons for 2 years while you're studying music theory, and those two things go together really well. So it took, I don't know, 6 to 8 months of kind of getting in that groove, and then things started to click. I was able to actually start reading music, and I was progressing in all the ensembles and solo music I was playing, but there was so many things that I had to go back and relearn, and it's I'm sure I did. I still, like, if I compare my classical playing to somebody who started maybe at 8 years old or 10 years old, learning in that things. Style, it's, I mean, they're substantially farther ahead than I still may be. I don't know, but it was one of those things that certainly just took a lot of extra practice and patience. And,
talking about like things starting to click or whatever after a certain amount of time, it's so amazing how the mind works like that. Like something you just won't get it, you don't understand, and you practice and all that, and then all of a sudden, like, keep practicing, and then it just like clicks, and it's not instantly easy, but it's something that is like a click. Something turns on, and you're like, okay. Yeah. I remember sitting in calculus class in like my senior year of high school, and I remember exactly what seat I was sitting in, and she'd been going over some problem, and I was just like, I have no idea what you're doing. Like, it just looked like gibberish on the board. I didn't understand how this turned into that. And then she explained it I said, can you just explain it one more time? And she explained it one more time, and it was like somebody just flipped on a spotlight in my mind. I was like, oh, okay, got it. All right, move on. You know,
next.
It's just it's a weird. We're weird things. We are.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, repetition, and then eventually something clicks and it sticks with you. And it's interesting to me what sticks with you for, you know, decades and what doesn't sometimes. And it's like weird bits of information. It's like, oh, I remember so and so or such and such, and it's like, well, how and why do I have that?
Like where you were sitting in a calculus class when your teacher went over the derivative of something or whatever. You know, like, why do I remember that? I don't know, but it's there.
Yeah.
When you were in school and doing all this, were you working or were you still playing?
I've always had my hands in a lot of different projects and doing different things, and it's no different now than it ever has been. I've still got a lot of things going on, but just kind of moving through school, it was working for Crew One and doing the stagehand work as much as I could just to kind of help with bills and whatever else. But then
were they good about saying, you saying, hey, I'm really swamped with school for these few weeks.
Oh yeah.
But I've got these 2 weeks.
Yeah. Basically, I just let them know the days that I was looking for work, and they would assign me something, or they'd let me know when they had a big show coming through and see if I was available. But it wasn't a typical like 8 to 5 schedule. It was just kind of, well, we have work these days. You can either come or you can't.
Yeah.
So doing that, it was rough for a few years because that was really the only job that I had. But then as I started to progress and meet people that were also in music school, and I started to pick up gigs. And then so by the time, I guess I re-enrolled in a music program in 2006. And then I graduated in 2010. But so during those 4 years, I'd say probably by 2007 or 8, I had really developed a pretty good network of different musicians and friends. And a lot of it came back to the first guys that I was in that band with Low Cash. Yeah. They would call me when they had an artist or they needed a guitar player. And so I was picking up work and meeting, and it was a constant networking thing that I didn't realize was happening at that time.
Yeah.
And so it just
so much of it. So much of, everything.
Yeah,
in life,
absolutely. Everything that I've kind of come to know or gigs that I've gotten has been through somebody that I met along the way. It's not because somebody sees me on, I don't know, finds my number and calls me for something, they don't know me.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And so often, I mean, of course, being a good musician is important, but so often it also comes down to just being cool. Just be a good person that people enjoy spending time around, because so little of that time that you're on the road is actually on stage playing, and the rest of it, you got to be able to sit next to this person for hours.
Yep.
And not be thinking, man, this guy's an asshole.
Some people have even come up with the nickname of like 2245. It's like, what does that mean? He's like, man, you're great for that hour and a half you're on stage, or hour and 45, but man, the other 22 hours and 45 minutes we got to work on.
Yeah, right. So true. I remember somebody telling me when I first I came up here, and I just wanted to be a guitar player when I came to town. And so like a year or so after being here, I went out and did a few short runs with a smaller band at the time. And I remember, I don't remember who it was. Somebody told me, like, just be cool. You know, of course, learn the songs, do well at that. But
yeah, the hang is very underestimated, as well as, you know, in the, I don't know, the more popular music world, image is huge. I mean, when I got the job with Low Cash, it was not because I could outplay the guitar player that was there before. He was twice my age, had more experience playing music professionally than I'd been alive. Yeah. And I mean, there was no way that I was a better musician than he was, but I had the image they were going for, and I could play.
Important. Yeah. It's show business.
So, yeah.
It's not, if they want to hear, if somebody wants to hear perfect playing exactly like the album, then they can sit at home and listen to the album.
Sure.
You know, it's a show, it's entertainment, you know.
And music has become so visual over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 decades that it's just, you know, the days where you only heard music by sitting down and listening to a radio or a record or whatever, and you weren't visually seeing these performers. That's not the case ever.
Almost never exists now.
And so, and people are identifying somebody by their image. So it's really a bigger piece of the puzzle than I like to admit is, I don't know, worthwhile.
Yeah.
Or useful.
But as a musician, you don't want to admit that.
Yeah. It's like, put the ugly people back in music. It'll get better.
Yeah. We want Conway Twitty and all those people that could really sing, but you don't want to look at.
Right.
Johnny Paycheck.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you read music fully?
I can.
Right now, if I just set some sheet music down, you could like get a guitar and play it.
Well, you know, first off, I'm a guitar player, so I can do it, but it may not be like a horn player.
Right. Yeah.
But yes, I mean, that's just a guitar player joke. I can read.
I took piano class. So I took piano when I was like 7 and 8, and then moved to guitar because I didn't want to learn the shit that was in the piano book. Naturally.
For sure.
And then in college, I went back and took I want to say I took like 4 semesters of just a standard beginner piano class. Still can't read. Still can't sit down and just like read music like I'm reading words. If you give me the sheet music and give me about 2 or 3 hours, I can like figure it out and then basically play it by memory or by ear. But it just blows my mind when people can sit down and never have like sight read, just never have seen this before, and then just play it.
That's I think a lot of that is, I mean, piano players are great at that. Horn players are great at that, and a lot of it's based on the pedagogy and the tradition of the instrument. Where guitar it's a folk instrument. People typically learn the instrument through an oral tradition. It's not something that most people sit down and start from the beginning reading music and understanding music theory.
Point, yeah.
And it's not, I mean, I've taught the instrument for a long time now, and that's one of the things that has always jumped out through my own personal experience with the instrument and then observing everybody else that's a guitar player. It's very rare that you find somebody that is excelled in reading and theory and they're a guitar player. It's just
that's a
rare.
good point. I never thought about it because it being a folk and traditionally like when we were on our way to go kayaking that day, we were listening to. Were you in the car in Stevens?
No, I was.
Okay,
yeah, I was
we were like the whole way. There was 4 of us in Stevens' Jeep, and we had some kind of bluegrass going.
Yeah,
you know, there was no words. It was all instrumental bluegrass CD he had playing, and nobody was talking. We were just riding down these back roads in East Tennessee and listening to this. And I told him, I said, it's crazy to think that back in the day, you know, a couple 100 years ago, people would just work all week, and then on Saturdays they'd get together, and whoever had whatever instrument, you just bring them together, and we'll just play this old folk song with these chords, these 4 chords or whatever.
And you didn't have TV, and you didn't have radio, and that was entertainment for I don't know, musicians and everybody else.
Yeah, those guys, I'm sure, didn't read music. They just somebody taught them.
And typically,
Pappy showed them some chords.
But typically when you find bluegrass players still, even the young prodigies, I mean, some of them are reading, especially the fiddle players, but I think a lot of it is still very much an oral tradition, and that's the case in folk music, and that's not just the case with American folk music. I mean, I know that in various other countries, a lot of people are still just learning orally, and some people do much better with that. Some people do much better seeing it on paper in front of them.
Yeah.
So
just different minds.
Yeah,
work
exactly.
Ways. When you were in school at this point, is that when you started listening to like the jazz side of things, or had you listened before?
I was musically, I was very unsophisticated as a late teenager, and I don't know. I guess people's musical tastes usually aren't very sophisticated, unless maybe they come from a musical family.
Yeah.
You know,
it's that's a very good term for how I feel a lot of times when I hear musicians that are really into like jazz or classical, and when I hear y'all talking about those people, I feel very unsophisticated.
Well, I mean, and some of it, especially classical music, has got, the pinky out in the air vibe to it seems a little bit esoteric and not quite with, I don't know, what most people listen to. And there's a little bit of a turnoff, and that's a whole nother subject, but, I don't know. Getting into flamenco music was accessible to me because it was still a form of folk music. So, I mean, the rhythms are very complicated and unusual to an American listener, or really anybody outside of that kind of Spanish tradition. And then, so anyways, that took a second for me to kind of experience. And I mean, the first record I got was a Paco de Lucia record. And I was like, man, this guy is incredible. I've never heard a guitar played this way, and the rhythms and everything that they're doing, and they don't use a pick. That was also
all just their hands.
Yeah, it's all finger style. And so by listening to that and then gradually progressing into classical guitar music, that opened up classical piano music and other classical repertoire, especially then studying that music. And then once I got into MTSU, I was like, well, I'm studying to be a guitar player. I should really be doing as many projects as I can. So where everybody else was taking one lesson, I was taking 4.
Oh, wow.
And I was studying classical guitar. I was studying jazz guitar. I was studying jazz arranging. And at one point I was even studying a Turkish oud, which is a fretless instrument that is like a predecessor to the lute. Oh, wow. And is still used in Middle Eastern Arabic style music. And it's got a real interesting sound, but it's interesting to hear
what's it called again?
An oud, O-U-D.
Okay.
And there's Turkish versions of it. There's other kind of Middle Eastern versions that involve different tunings, but it's a pair-backed instrument, much like a bowl-back mandolin or a lute. But there are no frets, nylon strings, and you use a plectrum that's 5 or 6 inches long, and so there's a very percussive aspect to the instrument.
I think I've seen pictures and videos of those things.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. But I had an opportunity to kind of play with an ensemble, so I studied a little bit of that. But for the most part, I was always taking at least 2 or 3 lessons. Jazz and classical guitar was happening.
I would have loved to see a graph of your mind. Going off, and I mean,
it was
learning all those things at one time.
Yeah, it's a catch-22. It's I was getting exposed and getting experience to all these different styles of music, but nothing was expanding and growing as rapidly as I would have liked to seen it. Grow.
Because you're in different places,
and you can only instead of spending 4 or 5 hours a day practicing just for my classical lesson, I was having to divide that time up. Well, I can spend an hour and a half doing this, but then I need to spend another hour and a half on arranging, and then I still have jazz tunes I need to play, and then I'm playing with this ensemble tomorrow, so I have music to learn, and it's your time gets
mentally taxing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then when I remember the first jazz lesson that I had, and my teacher was like, "Well, I want you to go home and I want you to write down at what point in the tune the head of the tune stops and the soloing begins." And I came back the next week, like, man, this sounds like one big solo. I don't get it. I don't hear it. And that's the biggest thing is being able to hear changes, hear form. And once you establish your inner ear, your ability to kind of just orally recognize these patterns and harmonic changes, everything starts to kind of sink in. And then every genre of music becomes more accessible. And
Okay.
You know, so then you don't have these clear separations between genres of music that seem so completely unaccessible, or that you just don't understand. It's just understanding a little bit about each thing makes everything, I don't know, more enjoyable.
Yeah, it kind of blends it all. It's all just becomes music.
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because classical music is very heavily based in form. Yeah. So especially things from the actual classical period, and the Baroque period, and even before that. But once you get past the classical period into the Romantic, things start to not become so clear. But, okay. You know, it's very much 4 bars of this. Here's another phrase that's 4 bars. Everything is on paper. It matches up perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, Mozart is probably the best example of a composer that does that.
Okay.
It's very predictable music.
Okay.
Even if you're not familiar with it, in my opinion.
Yeah. So you can easier to pick out the different.
Yeah. I mean, you're listening and you expect the music to do something and it does it.
Yeah.
You know, and then composers start getting bored with that, so they lead to the expectation, and then it goes somewhere else.
Yeah, okay.
And so that's kind of
it's cool. You're talking about like getting to the point to where you can hear that where you might not have heard it before, mm-hmm. and to where you're listening to different music and you're hearing that across the board. We were talking about, I think when we were on that kayaking trip, some of us were talking about musicians. So many musicians, once they get to a certain point in their career, when they're just like driving, they either want silence mm-hmm. or maybe like a podcast of people talking.
Sure.
Because I was explaining this to somebody again the other day, like some people hear music and they're just entertained and it sounds great and they're just having fun while they're driving and listening to music. But like when I hear music across the board of any kind, my mind just automatically starts thinking of solo patterns that I could do over this, or like the structure of the song, or mm-hmm. what key it might be in, what kind of chord that might be. Oh, that's the 6, or whatever.
Right.
And so you just start flowing through all that in your head, and it can be like overwhelming or tiring if you just do nothing but listen to music for 3 hours on a road trip. So
yeah, and I always have been. I have not been good at listening to lyrics of music because I've almost always listened to instrumental music. And that goes back to even listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, the blues is such a basic form of music. You've got a line, it's then repeated, and then you've got a slight variation on that line, that AAB type thing with blues music. But even then, I mean, I was listening to what Stevie was doing on the guitar, not to really what he was saying. And that's, I mean, fast forward 20 years, if I hear a bluegrass tune, my ears immediately go to what is the mandolin doing? What is the fiddle doing? What is that guitar doing? And I'm listening to everything else, and it's like my brain just excludes the vocals because I don't sing. I don't really care so much about that. No, I mean, that's just not the way I listen to music, and that's backwards from, I think, a lot of people, minus musicians. I think a lot of musicians may be in that with me. So, a lot of people that don't have any musical abilities, they'll be like, "Oh, there's a mandolin in that." I couldn't even tell. What's a mandolin?
Right? Yeah. Right. How many instruments do you play? Oh, that's a crazy question to ask because a lot of people that are very musical will be like, "I don't know, how many can you hand me?" Yeah,
it's if it's got strings, I can figure it out.
Yeah.
If it does not have frets, it will take me substantially longer.
Right.
But I see myself as a guitar player, and so that and studying classically, that really opened up both my right and left hand to a lot of independence. So picking up something like the banjo, where if I was only a flat picking guitarist, that would take a lot of time to develop the muscle memory and independence in the right hand to be able to play that instrument. But since I already have that there, it's really just understanding, oh wait, there's a high string on the bottom where I'm used to having my lowest pitch. Right. It's actually the highest pitch of the instrument. So it's just navigating those hurdles. But I mean, I play guitar, I can play a little bit of banjo, I play dobro and lap steel, mandolin, variations of mandolin, octave mandolin, or a bouzouki, which is just a mandolin tuned down a full octave. And a bouzouki just has, instead of all of the strings being tuned to the same pitch, the lower two are tuned in octaves, like a 12-string guitar would be.
Right on.
So it's an Irish take on the tuning of the instrument, and it is a very drone-like sound.
I think I would love to, and I'm sure you studied this at some point, but learn like the history and evolution of instruments.
Oh yeah,
I think that would be super interesting to hear, like whatever the before a guitar, like way before a guitar? Like what came?
The lute.
Yeah, was that the lute turned into the guitar?
Yep. And so the lute kind of was what people were playing, and that's what composers like J.S. Bach was actually writing for. He had suites that were lute suites. And some of the cello suites were then adapted to the lute. And so that's what things were written for during, the late 17th century, early 18th century.
Was that the ones that, like, you saw images and paintings of people, like, strapped on their back, travelers or whatever?
Yeah, and it was, the big pear-backed or bowl. The bowl-backed instruments. That's a good description of a lute. Yeah. But things are also tuned in courses on that instrument, or courses meaning double strings. So like a mandolin or a 12-string guitar has 2 strings for the same pitch. Yeah. A lute will do the same. For the most part, there are some courses that just have a single string. But that kind of then in the mid to late 18th century was kind of adapted to what we now know as the guitar or the classical guitar, but a much smaller version. It was called the Baroque guitar. And so that, and I may have my dates off, but that was certainly in the 18th century time frame, was the development of the 6-string guitar in, the tunings using a 4th and 1/3. And so that was kind of where that went
go into the classical guitar, and then the modern day come out of the classical?
So the Baroque guitar was really used a lot by composers like Mario Giuliani. He was an Italian composer that was so prolific and virtuosic that his music really kind of adapted to that instrument, and he was one of the most notable or famous players of that time period. But it wasn't until kind of the late 19th century where the Torres version or model of the classical guitar kind of became the foundation of what we now know as the modern classical guitar. And so this was around 1875-ish. Okay. I don't know exactly when that came about. It may have been, a couple decades before. But
was that
was in Spain. Yeah. Okay. So that was in Spain. And then the Torres.
We're over here fighting about dumb shit, and they're over there like creating the classical guitar.
Yeah, exactly. We were in the midst of our Civil War. They're over kind of creating these new instruments. But the guitar is a weird instrument because it's we don't have that much history with the modern classical guitar or the modern guitar in general. I mean, the electric guitar is 70 years old, or if you take it back to the 30s, I think, when 20s or 30s when the first pickups were started. Yeah. It's kind of we don't have the history and the building tradition that a violin has, where the most notable and sought after instruments came from the 18th century. A Stradivarius, or these instruments are now the really probably the high end is the instrument that Itzhak Perlman, probably the best violinist performing in the world. His violin is, I don't know, $16 million.
Whoa.
Yeah, the guitar doesn't have anything like that. Yeah. And you don't have the foundation of those centuries worth of building techniques either. Yeah. So it's still very much a new instrument. I guess is kind of the whole point of that.
What's the oldest instrument right now that people still play regularly, do you think? Would it be a string? I mean, I guess a drum. I guess a drum would probably be.
A drum, and probably some variation of a flute. Okay. Something that, that could even go back thousands of years as just a hollowed out piece of bamboo, for example, that has holes in it. Native Americans were using flutes and drums long before we ever got to the North America, but I think that kind of goes back into, like the Celts and Scottish and all these people were using these wind instruments because that was the way that they could create music.
Yeah. I guess technically the oldest instrument would be our vocal cords.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. First and foremost.
Yeah. I had a producer, a friend of mine, my friend Hallie Phillips, that produced my Memphis Session CD. That's Sam Phillips' granddaughter. Okay. We were talking one day, and talking about drums and just the natural instinct and how it relates to people and the rhythm of music and just whatever, some deep conversation we were having.
Sure.
And she related it, I never heard it put this way, but related the drum beat to your heartbeat. And that's why we connect so much with music at a deeper level than we even understand.
Sure.
Because it relates to the blood pumping through our body.
And it's physical. You can feel it, you can dance to it. So I think, and that was one of the biggest things of music, was it was something that brought people together, and that people could dance to.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what classical music was in 15th, 16th, 17th century. And even before that, it was music that was composed for royalty to dance to.
Yeah.
So most of these things were dance suites, where if you hear I don't know how much people outside that don't listen to much classical music, I mean, like somebody like J.S. Bach, most of what he wrote outside of music that was composed for the church was composed as dance suites. So you'd hear a 25-minute piece, but that was really 6 different pieces of music that were all in a certain form, certain time signature. They were dances.
Huh.
And so that's...
So, yeah, it would be a 25-minute piece, but it would be different, like, sections for different dances.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it was still...
I always wonder why they were so long.
Well, and people like to perform it with no break. So, people go to a classical concert, and then there's a couple people in the back that are clapping between every movement, and other people are, like, looking over their shoulder, because the tradition is that even if it's one work that has 6 movements, it's meant to be heard as an entirety.
Yeah.
But
please hold your applause.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that I think kind of turns people off from listening to classical music, because they think it's kind of outside of their lifestyle or what they experience. It's too sophisticated, perhaps. Yeah. When that's really not the case. I've had great experiences playing classical music in a bar where people they don't expect to hear that. And when they do, there's an appreciation for music that's kind of underlying, I think, with all of us, that if you hear something that you can tell took somebody a lot of time and energy and practice, you just kind of, you're drawn to it. You listen. Yeah. Even if you're in a bar getting hammered. Yeah. Some people are trying to kind of revitalize classical music by taking it into a pub or a bar, something where people don't have to feel like they need to be in a suit to listen to it. Right. So, yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Right.
When you finished school and you still doing like the stagehand work here and there?
No, I stopped doing that around 2008. Okay. 7 or 8, I really stopped doing that because I started getting enough work as a musician where I didn't need to do that anymore. And it was something where it's hard work. It's physical labor. What that job is. And
so you were gigging then?
Yeah. So I started playing with various country acts, and I was a lot of times being hired as a band leader to either kind of, band leader, it can mean a lot of different things. In that aspect of my life, it was being the person that was in charge of writing the charts, making sure players knew when and where they needed to be somewhere. If they had any questions related to the music, I was the one answering that. And so I was working with all these different bands, and that was it was usually every weekend. I was going to school Monday to Wednesday or Thursday, and then I'd leave Thursday night and go on the road, come home Sunday, and then that was my weekly schedule almost every week. And so it was a great time in my life where I was playing music 6 or 7 days a week, and it was great. All of my friends were into it. They were coming over and we were jamming. It's how we pass time. Yeah. As I've gotten older and I've kind of moved out in the country, I don't have that anymore, and I do miss it.
Yeah. The people coming and going
and just sitting down and playing music with your friends. It's I think as people start to age and get lives, it's something that requires more effort and commitment. Yeah, I know what you mean. Who were like some of the people you were playing with at that point? Were they people that people might know? Or? Probably not. Yeah. Most of them are not performing anymore. Yeah. I did a couple tours with a gal named Melissa Jones, and that was really great because we did everything that we were doing. A portion of her proceeds were donated to Wounded Warrior funds and military tributes. So we did an entire tour one summer of just military bases, that was a very rewarding process and tour. And you get to see some things that really every American should see. I think it gives everybody a deeper appreciation for what those people go through and struggle with.
For sure.
But anyways, I mean, there was a lot of different things that I was doing, and then I started getting into my own band. So we had a band called Tequila Flamenco Group, which was led by a good friend of mine named Silviu Chule. He's Romanian, really kind of came up in that classical tradition, and I mean, he's one of the finest guitar players I know. And he's gone on to finish a doctorate in classical guitar performance and has his own flamenco trio. And you know, he's a very accomplished musician and a good friend of mine. But we had you met Andrew Hazelden on the river trip. He played piano. And then Taylor Leonardo was on bass. Tony Hartman was on all the percussion.
Taylor. I know Taylor.
Yeah.
Okay, right on.
And me and Taylor and Tony were all roommates. And so we were in Tequila together. We were also in another band that Tony fronted called the Great Barrier Reefs, which was an island steel drum band.
Familiar. Yeah.
Which was an instrumental band. It had a drums, bass, guitar, saxophone, steel drum. And Tony
that sounds like
is a multi-instrumentalist and great percussionist, but also a very good keys player and steel drum player, and so he was a big aspect of both of those projects. But then the three of us being kind of the rhythm section and being roommates, we were always playing music.
For some reason, hearing steel drums makes me want to drink rum.
Yeah,
that seems like a normal thing, I guess.
Yeah, and then you can flip it over and cook stir fry.
Oh yeah.
How long? Stir fry dish you're playing, man?
How long were you in that flamenco thing?
I think Silviu graduated from MTSU in 2008, and then he moved down to Tallahassee, Florida, where he studied at FSU and did his master's and doctorate there. But we continued that group a year or two into when he moved down to Florida, and then so we were still kind of going down there and playing like paella parties and these other things, and it was really cool for me, and I think the rest of the guys, to play that music. We weren't really received all that well in Nashville. I mean, people really enjoyed the music, but there was this common misconception that we were a mariachi band. It was like, it's several thousand miles in the other direction.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Did you have while you were doing this, and like especially like after school, did you have an ultimate like goal that you were working toward, or did you just want to like? I just
wanted to play music, I wanted to play as much of it as possible and in as many styles as I could. Yeah. So that was always my goal, and even especially while I was in Nashville. Nashville was a great place for me to be exposed and playing everything from flamenco to classical to jazz to country and rock and roll, all these different styles of music. And so I felt like by the time I graduated in 2010, I had a great collection of skills. Yeah. And I felt comfortable playing with all these different groups. And then I went to Denver, Colorado and studied for my master's degree in just classical guitar. And that program was so intense that I had no time for any other style of music.
What made you choose Denver?
The teacher.
Yeah.
Ricardo Isnaola is one of the leading teachers, I think, in the classical guitar tradition. He is not only an amazing teacher, but as well a philosopher, a composer. He's just one of those people that when you get to meet and sit down, your time with that person is so precious that it really impacts the rest of your life. Because there's never a situation where that person doesn't have experience or doesn't know a piece of music. And that's not just specific to classical guitar. It's, really any piece of music in the art music tradition, not just classical music, but that art music being pretty much anything outside of pop music.
Okay.
He was just so knowledgeable in those things. As people like him and Cedric Dent, who I got to study arranging from, who was a member of Take Six. These are two musical mentors of mine that really had a lasting impact on kind of just my love for music, and the knowledge they were able to pass on was just incredible.
Yeah. How long were you in Denver?
4 years. 4 years? Yeah. I did the degree in 2 years, and that was, it was very intense. I was just doing just classical music and doing everything from, I did 2 solo recitals and did a lot of ensemble stuff, and I won some awards doing competitions and stuff like that. So that was, it was a great time, and I was surrounded by really good players. And that's always one of those things where as a musician, you kind of want to be the guy in the group that is just underneath everybody else because you're constantly pushed.
Yeah,
if you're the guy on top, then you have nobody really pushing you to get better.
That should be a thing for life.
Yeah.
For everybody.
For sure.
I mean, you always, you want to surround yourself with people that are better than you. So it pushes you. That's how I felt when I was hanging out with y'all around that fire. I was like, just sitting there watching. I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, how do you do that? I don't know, but it sounds good.
It goes both ways though. Because I don't really sing. I don't know. I mean, people want to, I'll play us a song. It's like, well, I don't know if you, I'll play you something.
Can you imagine the words?
Yeah, exactly. So it's, I don't know. It's catch-22.
When did you do the Lyle Lovett thing?
I did that.
Eric was telling me about that.
Yeah. I graduated from the University of Denver in 2012, and another dear friend of mine, Darren Foster, who was a roommate of mine at MTSU for a long time, and good drummer, but he finished the degree in audio engineering, and so he was out touring with Lyle as the monitor engineer, secondary monitor engineer, and audio guy, and so he called me and was like, man, we've got this tour that leaves in 2 or 3 weeks and the guitar tech can't do it. And I had gone in kind of part of doing all these different things. In 2007, I went and lived in Vermont for a month and went to a luthier school. So I learned how to build guitars and and I built a classical guitar from scratch doing the traditional method of hand scrapers, not many power tools, shaping everything by hand and kind of voicing.
Do you have the guitar that you built?
I do.
Oh, that's great.
It's really cool. Yeah, I need to get you over to the house and check it out. But it's really cool because it sounds good. It's an inspiring instrument. It's not the easiest thing to play, but I'd never built a guitar before.
Right. Oh yeah.
But now, I'm trying to. I've got this venture where I'm getting back into building guitars, so hopefully that kind of comes back around. But so I had done that, and then earlier I mentioned Ed Beaver. He was a guitar repairman and builder who kind of was my mentor.
Right.
So he pushed me to go to that luthier school, and when I came back, I started working in his shop, and so I was doing minor repairs and learning more about how instruments were built and how to properly intonate them and take care of them and all that. So I had a lot of that, and I had some nice instruments. So Lyle is such a great musician, and he is. His care for his instruments ranks very high in his list of priorities. Okay. And that he expects from the people that work for him. So that was certainly a thing was, am I comfortable holding his guitar that is, I don't know, 15 grand or, a lot of money. And it's, yes, I am. And I think once people heard me play and kind of knew a little bit about my background, it worked out. So anyways, Darren got me that gig.
Just some Jethro that walked in and
I can handle your guitar. Yeah. So I got that gig, and I spent 3 months on the road. That was a great experience to see like what tour life is actually like in the traditional sense, where Nashville is very much weekend warriors. Yeah,
for 3 or 4 days.
Exactly. And that was we were home 2 days and 2 days out of 75.
Yeah, so he was touring.
Yeah, I mean, some days we did 13 shows in a row without a day off.
Wow.
It was, and that's. As a crew member, you're working anywhere from 14 to 18 hours a day and sleeping for a little bit and doing it all over. So it's truly exhausting.
So you helping like load everything in?
Oh, yeah. I was on the truck in the morning, unloading all the gear, then guiding it to the stage. And I was the backlining guitar tech. So I was responsible for setting up every piece of gear on stage minus the drums.
Wow, yeah.
And making sure that everything was properly plugged in and tuned.
That's so important.
Yeah. All the thing, and then tearing it all down, making sure it's safe and it's in the truck the way it needs to be. And so that was, it was and then being on call for the show in case something were to go wrong. But about 6 weeks in, I was playing guitar backstage. Lyle kind of came up and he just sat there and listened to me play for a minute. And then that night he was like, you should play before we go on. Huh. I was like, I think I'd love that. Yeah. Right. So for 3 weeks, I got to kind of just go out and play solo classical guitar for Lyle Lovett before he came out on stage with, for the first, I think.
Was there an opening band?
Or was it was just Lyle. And so it was like an evening with type thing.
Okay.
And essentially what I was doing was I was replacing the walk-in music where they normally would just play a CD and people were coming in and being seated. Yeah. I was now the guy playing the walk-in music.
Were you off the stage?
No, I was on the stage. Okay. I was visible for, I don't know, I'd probably say 90% of the time people came in and they were listening. They would applaud when I got done, but they were still having conversation.
Right. Yeah.
And there was a couple times where it was dead quiet, and that was nerve-rattling experience a little bit.
How many people at these shows? Ballpark, I mean.
2,000 to 4,000, because he's doing theaters.
Oh, yeah, theaters.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a beautiful thing because these places are intended for music. You're not playing in a basketball arena.
Yeah.
And so it's...
Theaters, to me, that's just the best.
Oh, yeah.
That's the best place to play.
Absolutely.
I would rather play for 3,000 people in a nice theater.
That are listening and...
yeah.
And they're truly having an experience the way that music was kind of intended, you know? Yeah. It's not about all the video screens and flashy things that I just, in my opinion, take away from what you're listening to.
Yeah.
But I mean, my hat's always off to Lyle. I learned a lot from him just from watching him, how he interacted with the crowd. Did you get to spend much
time with him?
He's very personable. He would kind of come by and I'd get to talk to him every now and again, but I wasn't hanging out on his bus or anything. But
nice guy though.
Yeah, very nice guy. Yeah. And his dedication to his fans was very commendable.
That's great.
And to his show and the aspect. And I mean,
it would be easy for him to be like, all right, yeah, I'm Lyle Lovett. I'll go sing my songs and then go to the bus.
No, he employs one of the best working bands. I mean, the musicians that play for him that was incredible in itself.
Yeah.
Just meeting those people and shaking their hands and getting to know them. And then having some of those people stand on the side of the stage and listen to me play. That was, there was at one moment, it's kind of funny because I sit here with this huge beard. At that point, I was clean shaven. And for about 10 days, we had Leland Sklar come out and play bass. Now, Leland just go to Wikipedia, type in Leland Sklar and scroll down all the credits that he has. And it's amazing. And that's not just specific to him. That's like the drummer Russ Kunkel and all these great Matt Rawlings on piano.
Were all these guys out of Nashville or Texas?
Different places.
Different places?
Yeah,
okay.
Some Nashville, some LA, some New York.
Yeah, okay.
And so it was really, really cool getting to meet these guys like, I don't know, Luke Bulla is he's a leading fiddle player and singer and doing a lot of things around town. He plays fiddle for Lyle still, and just all these high caliber musicians that were becoming my friends as well as it seemed like almost colleagues a little bit once I started getting able to play. Certainly there was still this separation of band and crew and all that, but looking over on the side stage and seeing Leland sitting there and listening and applauding, it was really moving to get to do that.
How long were you with him?
I was with Lyle for pretty much 3 months. I did that one tour. I got to play for the last 3 weeks of it. But it was a great story and kind of a life-changing experience. And it was.
So had you moved back here at that point, or were you still technically?
Once I got done with that tour, I went back to Denver. I moved all my stuff into storage.
Yeah.
I didn't have a place, so I was just
for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, so I was just kind of couch surfing for a few months, and then a good friend of mine from Texas moved up, and we were rooming together, and we both kind of just decided we were done with the city, and so we moved into the mountains, and we're living at 10,500 feet in elevation.
Wow.
And had the mountains as our playground, so I was constantly out hiking and skiing back down to my place, and it was really cool. Dustin is still out
hike
there.
Up the mountain and then ski back down the way. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and my roommate, we went to middle school and high school together. His name's Dustin Fleming, and he is a Marine Corps veteran who suffered a sniper shot to the leg and had a lower leg amputation. But he moved to Colorado and had never snowboarded. He ate it so hard for that first year. I didn't know what was gonna happen. But now, 4 years later, he's on the U.S. Paralympic snowboard team.
Wow!
And he's over in New Zealand right now competing. So, anyways, that's just a little
that's cool.
But,
So Okay, so you're up in the mountains, skiing, hiking.
One day
growing your beard.
That point it had legitimate purpose.
Yeah,
as keeping me warm. And then I got a phone call in mid-February of 2013 from a friend from NTSU, kind of back to that whole networking thing that was like, "Hey man, Brantley Gilbert is looking to add a utility player. Would you be interested in auditioning?"
Yeah.
And so it was like, that was the first question, followed by, "Do you still have a beard?"
Really? Yeah.
And then, what instruments do you play?
Yeah.
And so it was, and so at that point, I'd been in a couple different bands. I was making my living teaching music and playing wedding gigs and just like corporate band type stuff, working at a church. And I had my hands in a lot of different projects, and I was making just enough to get by. But at that point, I did not care. It's just more about living in the mountains and being in nature. So anyways, I flew to Nashville, did one round of audition and got a call back, did another round of auditions and ended up getting the job and moved back to Nashville April 2013 and been here ever since.
Been with Brantley ever since?
Yep.
How often, how much does he tour? Is it pretty?
This year is a light year for us. We'll probably do 65 shows.
Okay.
Typically we do around 90 to 100. But it's the weekend thing. So, we'll start back, I think next year we start back with rehearsal at the end of January. First booked gigs are I don't know this for sure.
Yeah.
Probably around the beginning of February. And then we'll tour weekends. We'll have some time off here and there, but it'll probably go February to November or December next year.
Okay.
Where this year was February to into September.
Yeah.
So
everything, I guess you can't voice too many concerns because it's your current thing, but everything going well with that?
It's a great gig. It's I don't know. It's easy to kind of become a little bit complacent, but at the same time, it does not take much just to take one step back and kind of look at your situation and be like, well, where was I 4 years ago, 5 years ago? How has my life changed? Now I don't touch any of my gear anymore. Somebody sets it up and tunes it and hands me stuff, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's.
And I would guess also, just being able to look out at all those people that come to hear the songs that you get to play for them, and
sure,
just that energy that I can't imagine.
The energy is there. I think the hard part as a performer is trying to find an equal match to their energy and their excitement, because this is somebody that has been looking forward to this show for, I don't know, could be as long as a year. Maybe it's been more since they've seen him, and that this could be their favorite artist.
It's been less than 24 hours since you played the same songs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you go out on stage every night and kind of put that forward? The challenges are much different.
Yeah. That's well put. If you could go back to yourself at 18 years old and give yourself some advice, what would it be?
Probably to study music theory much more than I did.
Yeah.
From that age, I think that, if I would have really devoted a lot of time into understanding music theory, it really would have, at that age, it would have shaped everything that was to come afterwards, where my approach was very much from the technical aspect of playing music. And so I got really good at performing and executing, but maybe my skills weren't as strong music theory wise or improvisation wise as somebody that was devoted to like the jazz tradition, where all they did was interpretate music and harmony and improvise. Yeah. So it's two different worlds. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to join those together.
Right on, man. Well, where are you all playing coming up? You got the next few shows. This is going to come out tomorrow. So.
Okay. We have this weekend, I believe we're in Cincinnati and St. Louis, maybe.
So that'll be
check that.
September 15th, 16th.
And let's see here. Let me just
pull up the device.
Make sure I'm not giving out wrong information.
This has been really cool. I've learned a lot. If nothing else, I really enjoy talking about the old instruments and and the history of things. It's very interesting to me.
We're in Cincinnati and then Maryland Heights, Missouri, which I think is St. Louis area. That's September 15th and 16th. And then the last two shows of the year are September 22nd and 23rd in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and then Raleigh, North Carolina.
Right on. Well, if you're in any of those areas, people, you should go see Brantley Gilbert and go stand right in front of BJ and take your shirts off.
Yeah, I'll be stage left looking for you, throwing pics at you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for talking, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
There it was. Thanks for listening to me, amigos. Now, I'm not going to talk too long here at the end, so you can listen to BJ's masterful guitar work going on in the background here. Now, like I said, I do recommend go check out one of Brantley Gilbert's shows, if for no other reason to go see BJ and his fantastic beard. For show dates for Brantley's show dates and more info on BJ, you can check out don'tstifleme.com/028. Once again, as of right now, the only kind of income that I'm getting for doing this podcast and all the work that I put into it and the talks, the only kind of income I get is from you, the listeners. So there's no advertising or commercials right now. So please go give a look at patreon.com/DSM podcast. At this site, in return for monthly donations as low as $1 a month starting out, there are different levels of perks. And for each level, you get additional things. So there's behind the scenes pictures and videos and MP3 downloads from the episode. There's, you could get your name read off on a podcast like right now or on the website. There's also a level where you can get a custom song written and recorded for you by one of the guests and myself. And there's so much more. Just at least go check it out, see what you think, share it with somebody. Once again, that is patreon.com/DSM podcast. The podcast social medias are all at DSM podcast, and mine are all at Jacob Stifle. And that's going to do us for episode 28. Thank y'all so much for listening. After listening to BJ play in the background here, I think I'm going to go practice the guitar for a little while. Man, it means so much that you listen, especially if you listen this far and that you're enjoying these talks. I'm enjoying having them just as much as any of you are enjoying listening to them. So I want you to have a great rest of your day. Make sure you check back in next week for the next episode and click subscribe so it'll just add right to your phone. But until then, have a beautiful day. I love you all. I'll talk to you again soon.